Every night a horse returned alone. Until the cowboy followed. Subscribe Wild West Legends for more unforgettable stories. For 3 straight nights, the people of Hollow Ridge stopped breathing at sunset. Just as the last orange light slipped behind the canyon cliffs, a black stallion came tearing out of Black Hollow Canyon with no rider on its back and no rope in its reins. It ran like fire was chasing it. Hooves striking sparks across the stones, mane whipping like dark smoke behind it. It would charge through the center of town, stop beside the old water trough, breathe clouds into the cold air, and stare toward the mountains as if begging someone to understand. Then it would scream. A long, painful cry that made even strong men look away, and race back into darkness before anyone could touch it. Children hid under beds. Shopkeepers barred their doors. Old women whispered prayers. On the 3rd night, the horse arrived, with dried blood across its neck. And that was the moment the quiet man behind the saloon finally stood up. His name was Elias Kane, once the finest tracker in 3 territories. Now, a broken cowboy who trusted whiskey more than people. Men said he could follow boot prints across stone and hear lies before they were spoken. But they also said something inside him had died 20 years earlier. Elias stepped into the street, saw the horse beneath the lantern light, and his glass slipped from his hand. Burn scar on the left flank. Silver brand on the shoulder. He knew that horse. Its name was Midnight. And Midnight had belonged to his younger brother Jonah. The brother everyone believed died in Black Hollow Canyon 20 years ago. No one in Hollow Ridge slept that night. The stallion stood tied outside the saloon, but refused oats, water, and every hand that reached for him. Yet, when Elias came near, Midnight lowered his head and nudged the cowboy's chest like an old friend who had crossed half the world to find him. Around the horse's neck hung a worn leather strap. Elias opened it with shaking fingers and pulled free a folded cloth scrap. 3 words were written in faded ink: "Come before dawn." Sheriff Dugan laughed too loudly and called it a prank. But Elias had already gone pale. He knew that handwriting. Jonah had carved the same crooked letters in barn doors when they were boys. 20 years earlier, Jonah rode into the canyon, chasing rumors of lost silver and fertile land beyond the cliffs. Searchers later found broken wagon wheels, blood on stone, and 1 torn boot near a ravine. The town declared him dead. Elias never believed it. But winter storms erased every trail, and time buried hope under routine. Now the impossible stood before him, breathing through flared nostrils. Sheriff Dugan grabbed his arm and warned him. No man rode Black Hollow at night and returned sane. Elias pulled free, strapped on his revolver, and said quietly, "I already never came back." Then he swung into the saddle. Midnight reared once, screamed into the moonlight, and launched toward the canyon with Elias, riding like a man chasing his own ghost. The trail into Black Hollow twisted through walls of stone, taller than churches. Midnight never slowed. He leapt narrow ravines, climbed ledges no sensible horse would trust, and cut through thorn brush that tore at Elias' coat and face. Moonlight flashed across cliffs like knives. Twice wolves howled from unseen ridges. Once a boulder crashed behind them, as if the canyon itself wanted. The rider turned back. After hours of impossible riding, Midnight veered toward a waterfall that seemed to strike solid rock. At the last second, he plunged through the curtain of water and into a hidden passage behind it. Elias clung tight as they entered darkness, then light again. What opened beyond stole his breath. A secret valley lay tucked between towering cliffs. Lantern-lit cabins, fenced fields, smoke rising from chimneys, gardens, windmills, children's laundry hanging on lines, and dozens of faces staring in shock at the stranger who had arrived. Before Elias could speak, a voice behind him said, "You still ride too stiff, brother." Elias turned. Standing there, older, scarred, gray at the temples, but alive, was Jonah Kane. For one heartbeat, the world stopped. Then Elias punched him in the jaw, so hard Jonah fell backward into the dust. A second later, both brothers were laughing and holding each other, like men trying to catch 20 stolen years. But joy lasted only seconds. Rifles clicked from the ridge above. 10 armed riders stepped from shadows. Their leader removed his hat and smiled coldly. "Well now," he said. "Looks like the grave finally delivered the other Kane." The man on the ridge was Marshal Briggs, once praised across the frontier as a fearless lawman. Hollow Ridge had sung songs about him years ago. But legends often rot in private, Jonah explained in hurried whispers as guards tied their hands. After surviving the canyon, Jonah had discovered the hidden valley. A paradise fed by underground springs. Rich soil and veins of silver running beneath the hills. Families fleeing debt, war, and hunger followed him there. They built homes in secret and dreamed of freedom. Then Briggs found them. He arrived offering protection from raiders and outsiders. Once inside, he took control. He rationed food, seized silver, hanged dissenters, and turned the valley into a prison, disguised as peace. Anyone who tried to escape vanished. Jonah had sent Midnight out many times over the years carrying messages, hoping the horse would someday find Elias. Storms, wolves, and distance always defeated him, until now. Briggs ordered, the brothers dragged into the square. Around them stood thin farmers, frightened mothers, and children taught to lower their eyes. Briggs leaned close enough for Elias to smell tobacco on his breath. At sunrise, he said, "I hang Jonah. Then I shoot you for trespassing." Elias smiled slightly. "You speak brave for a man standing on borrowed ground." Dawn painted the cliffs red as the whole valley gathered around a rough gallows. Jonah stood with a rope around his neck. Elias knelt nearby, wrists tied, face bruised, but calm. Briggs climbed the platform and raised his rifle like a preacher lifting scripture. "Let this remind you," he shouted, "that no one leaves Black Hollow." He kicked the lever. In that same instant, Midnight screamed from somewhere beyond the crowd. The black stallion charged like thunder through the square, smashing into the gallows post, with enough force to splinter wood. Jonah dropped hard, but alive. As the beam cracked sideways, Elias rolled, seized a fallen pistol, and shot the hanging rope free in one clean blast. Then the valley erupted. Years of fear shattered all at once. Women struck guards with frying pans and shovel handles. Old miners swung picks. Farmers hurled stones. Children opened animal pens, sending goats and horses crashing through the square. Smoke, dust, screams, and flying timber swallowed everything. Briggs fired wildly and fled toward the silver mine entrance hidden in the hillside. Elias chased him without looking back. Inside the mine, lantern light flickered across wet walls, threaded with shining silver. Briggs ran deeper, laughing like a man who believed greed made him clever. "You can have the town," he shouted through the tunnels. "The silver is what matters!" Elias followed the echo until he stopped suddenly. The floor ahead had been lined with blasting powder and fuse rope. Briggs stood on the far side with a torch in hand. "One more step," he sneered, "and we both become dust." Elias slowly holstered his gun and raised his hands as if surrendering. Briggs grinned. That was his mistake. From a side shaft behind him came pounding hooves. Midnight burst through the darkness and kicked Briggs square in the back. The torch flew. Briggs stumbled, screaming, into an open extraction pit and vanished below. The loose torch landed in spilled powder. Sparks raced. Elias grabbed Midnight's reins and sprinted as the tunnel thundered apart behind them. They burst into sunlight just as the mine entrance collapsed in a cloud of smoke and stone. When dust cleared, the people of the valley stood in silence. Jonah stepped forward, rope burns still red on his neck. "It's over," he said. Elias looked at the broken gallows, the frightened families, the morning sun touching free faces for the first time in years. "No," he answered quietly. "Now it begins." Months later, roads were carved through the canyon. Trade wagons rolled in. The hidden silver funded wells, schools, barns, and a clinic. Families once trapped were reunited with relatives who had mourned them as dead. Jonah became mayor because everyone trusted the man who first dreamed of freedom there. Elias refused titles, praise, and money. He repaired fences, taught children to track coyotes, and every sunset rode Midnight to the ridge where the horse had once cried into the dark for help. In Hollow Ridge, parents still tell their children one lesson whenever dusk falls and hoofbeats echo through memory. Sometimes the miracle is not the horse that comes back alone, but the one brave soul who chooses to follow it.